Why is it important to talk about sex with your kids? At what age? And how to overcome your shyness about it? These and more questions I brought to Holly Osmond today, a psychotherapist in the Bay Area. So, she is also a sexuality educator. So, stay with us because you are going to enjoy as much as I did this conversation today. Let's start. Welcome back, my dear amigos in harmony. If you are in YouTube, welcome. Please subscribe. And if you are in the podcast, in any platform in the podcast, listening to us, please subscribe. That is really helpful to us. And leave us your review or your comment. We are here for that. Today, I am going to interview Holly Osmond, who is a psychotherapist and sexuality educator. She has a private practice in the Silicon Valley area in San Francisco. She has been working and she was born and raised in this area for 20 years. She is also an adjunct lecturer at Santa Clara University in the Counseling Psychology Graduate Department. She teaches sexuality as well as assisting in the hypnotherapy class. Additionally, Holly enjoys speaking to schools about various facets of sexuality, identity, and development. And talking to her is just delicious, amazing. Please enjoy this conversation that will answer a lot of your questions about how to talk to children about sex. Here we go. Hey, Holly, thank you for being here with us today. And this topic is something that I have been waiting for a year because we wanted to have the very right person. Thank you for being that right person. So, hey, how are you today?
I am well.
Yeah, okay. And ready for our topic? So, ready to have this conversation?
Yes.
Yes.
I am.
Why is it important to have this conversation with our kids?
It's so important to talk about sexuality and bodies with our children and with our teens. And the main way to think about it is less about talking about sex and more about how to have conversations with our kids and our teens about bodies, sexuality, relationships across the lifespan. And all young people go through sexual development. It's a normal process. And all kids deserve information about what's happening to them and what they can expect and how to grapple with things as they get older and go through puberty and have big emotions and learn about things out in the world, whether or not their parents or their schools are talking to them about it. And what's interesting is research findings go against what a lot of people might imagine, in the sense that research consistently shows that the more kids and teens are educated about sexuality, the more likely they are to delay getting involved sexually, to use contraception if they do get involved, to reduce their amount of partners if they're educated. And if parents are part of that conversation with their kids in a non-shaming way, the kids feel closer to their parents. So a lot of people think that the less kids are educated, the safer they'll be. And research does not support that because they go ahead and they're sexual anyway, and they're just less educated and potentially less safe.
I know parents will not like to hear that, but the more pleasure they will have, the children, when they start their sexual life, because it can be very uncomfortable not knowing anything and start trying. Yeah.
If you really want to look forward and think about the best way that your kids, when they get older and they're adults, the best way they can have a pleasurable sex life as adults is to be educated in a non-shaming way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So conversations about genitals, if you can not say that they are dirty or unclean or gross, or that sexuality is bad, or those kinds of things, those can lead to shame, and shame can get in the way of pleasure.
Yes. Yes. That's a good point. How and when is an important time, and how to do it? How to talk to them?
Well, you really can't start too early, but it depends on what that means. And what I mean is, a lot of times it's better to have a bunch of little talks, little things that you say here and there, rather than one or two big talks where you say everything. Kids are much more likely to listen if you sprinkle things throughout their childhood and adolescence. And the younger you start that, the more they're willing to listen to you when they get older. So right from the beginning, parents have an opportunity with infants when they're on the changing table. It's really interesting to see how so many parents use the changing table as a time to talk about bodies and say, here are your toes and here's your ears and things. And a lot of times they don't mention the genitals at all, or it's the one place, the one body part that gets a different name, a cutesy name, a slang name. We don't have slang name for elbow or things like that. So either we don't mention the whole reason why they're on the changing table, or kids grow up with this sense of there's something different about my genitals because they're the only thing that doesn't have a real name, because they do know that there's a real name out there. They sort of absorb that message somewhere along the line. So right from the beginning, that may not sound like it's talking about sex, but in fact, it's a great way to start with just matter of fact, non-shaming information. And then by about age 4, depending on the child, little things about, again, bodies, sexuality, and relationships, more than talking about sex or intercourse per se. There's so much more you can say throughout the lifespan, throughout the childhood.
So you're right. Is the only part that we change the name, and it sort of sounds like inappropriate to actually say the name in public. Yeah.
Yeah. There's this sense that it's inappropriate. Yes, exactly. When it's so interesting. Why would a different body part be inappropriate if all of us is supposed to be created equal or created in God's image, or however people believe? That all of it is good and appropriate. And this sense of shame and silence and stigma is passed down from generations. And it can be really difficult for parents to say these words and get used to it. But in fact, they can. The more they say it, the more used to it they are. And if children know the names of their genitals and they've been spoken out loud, those kids are safer when they come against abuse situations or truly inappropriate situations where they can actually know what body part might have been involved in a bad situation, or also be able to say it. Because sometimes when these things are never talked about, kids get the sense that I cannot talk about this, and they will not speak up.
Yeah, a child that knows the names and the proper parts may be seen awkward in the elementary or in the middle school or whatever, but it also empowers. Yeah, it really does.
It does empower them, and kids pick up on social cues pretty well. So even if they have a tremendous amount of knowledge, or even just the basic knowledge of the actual names of their genitals, most kids don't go around just throwing that out there. A lot of parents worry, if I talk to my kids, what if they say something and then another parent asks me about that? And I understand that worry. It doesn't happen that often. It's as if even when kids know, they somehow pick up on the sense that they don't share it too much.
Yeah. And also what I notice, especially in the teen years, is that when parents are more conservative or more cautious, actually the teenagers tend to be more brave about pushing the buttons Yeah, about pushing the buttons for the parents. So, yeah, the more taboo you make it, the more your child is going to be interested in learning something. I will say.
Yes,
Well,
I
tell me.
yes, I think you're absolutely right. And that goes back to the research that says that the more kids are educated about sex, they are more likely to delay getting involved. It's not taboo and they know about it. And if you've taken the time to talk with them here and there about sex, another thing that you have the opportunity to do as parents is talk about how to know when you're ready,
Mhm.
how to deal with big feelings in the moment, how to make decisions about what you're ready for earlier instead of in the moment, how to talk about consent, how to talk about how to ask for consent, how to talk about how to give consent, what are boundaries. These are all so important. And if we don't talk about sex, we also don't talk about those things.
So talking about sexuality and sex involves talking about the menstruation, talking about the first menstruation or the wet dreams for the child. What age?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with menstruation, it's earlier than you think. There's a lot of research that shows that menstruation is happening earlier in
Mhm.
girls. And
Yeah.
there's a lot we could say about why that is with some of the things in our cosmetics and our soaps and our foods and things like that. But really, what you
Mm.
want to be doing is having the conversation about what menstruation is probably by about third or fourth grade. Some girls, really, what you want to look at is the breast bud development, just the very beginning of breast buds, which can happen in some
Mm.
girls even earlier than that. But if that's happening, then menstruation will be coming, even if your child is younger. Girls can get their period at 8, at 9. So they
Mhm.
need to know it's coming. It can be very scary for them to not know, especially if there's an idea that they're now a woman, but they're only 8 years old or 9 years old. So parents sometimes don't realize that um, they need to have those conversations earlier than some schools give that information in 5th grade, and that's too late for a percentage of girls. As far as wet dreams, for boys, there's also a wide variation, but generally, again, boys should know about wet dreams by about age 8. It may not be until 10 or 11 or 12 until that happens, but it could be earlier. And it's a very scary thing to happen to a boy if they don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
They'll think, what happened? I broke it. I did something wrong. I feel ashamed. I feel scared. And so letting them know at some point this will happen probably, and it's okay. And it's not the same as wetting your bed, or it's not bad. It's just part of development is helpful.
I had the idea a couple months ago about what about if I create some small videos that you can put to your child, yeah, and we talk about that topic and you can put it. And then, yes, it's convenient, and many parents will say yes. Yeah, Carmen, you can actually do an online course and I will pay for it. Huh. It's tricky because nobody can talk like you talk to your children. Isn't that true, Holly?
It is true. And you really bring up such an important topic because there's a debate, for instance, between parents and schools. Who is going to educate my kids sexually? And
Mm-hmm.
some people think it's the school's responsibility, and some schools think it's the parents' responsibility, and nobody really knows what's appropriate. And people have so many different values and so many different cultures. And so the parents really are the ideal people if they have some idea as to how to approach it in a non-shaming way.
Yeah, yeah. This is why it's like, I'm putting them easy. If you are a parent, sorry, but keep listening because you need to get educated and brave to talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have another question, Holly. When our kids are older, when is the time that we say we miss the chance, if we ever miss the chance to talk about sex with them?
I don't think parents have ever missed the chance. If they are older and if parents have never talked about things and they didn't know how, or, they weren't raised with this, they didn't know, they didn't say anything, it's never too late. So let's start with, if you haven't said anything to your kid and they are in middle school or high school, okay. I think it's reasonable that parents might acknowledge, I realize I have not talked with you, but I would like to, and I'm trying to learn about this, and I realize it's important. Saying something like that. A parent could say that to their 25-year-old kid as well. So it's not too late. I think one thing that I would recommend is that if you haven't said anything and the kid is older, that parent might hear back, I already know everything. Don't worry, I know everything. And I would urge parents to see if they could push a little more conversation around that they may know the mechanics of what happens in intercourse, for example. But that doesn't mean that they have thought through, again, issues about consent, issues about the myths in pornography. A lot of young people, if they aren't having open and candid conversations with trusted adults, then they're having them with peers or they're learning through porn. And porn is entertainment. It's the performing fantasy. It's not realistic. It's not what real sex looks like between real people. But a lot of teenagers don't understand that. And so then they base what they're doing on what these actors are doing, these unrealistic standards, because that's all they know. And so being able to talk about those myths, being able to talk about consent, being able to talk about birth control. Some people, when they have had no education on birth control, think that it ruins the mood to use that. They don't want to do that. It ruins the mood, or they don't have access, but they're too embarrassed to try to figure out how to have access. So these are some of the conversations you can still have, even if kids think they know everything.
And I think just offering the idea of talking, because they may say, hey, what you are talking, or how embarrassing, or you, yeah. But they know you are there.
Right. And parents can say, I know, it's awkward. I know this is awkward for me too, but I love you and this is important. And let's have this conversation anyway, because I love you and I want you to be safe and informed.
Something very interesting, Holly, I don't know if you have noticed in your practice when I work with families or when I work with individuals mostly, is that either they don't do it or they told to their children, but they try to share their own experiences. And the kids don't enjoy that much, that part. Tell me what you find about it.
Yeah, it's generally not the best idea to do that. I understand the impulse that parents may have to say, this has been my experience and I don't want it to happen to you. Or, I get it. I've been there. Let me tell you my experience that might be similar. But you're right. A lot of kids, for many topics, not just sex, they don't want to hear their parents. They're in a stage of development all the way through about mid-20s where they think that they know more and their parents are old and whatever they have to say is not truly that relevant. And when it's about sex and kids have internalized already messages about it being private or inappropriate, they really don't want to hear parents' experience. And if the parent is trying to say, don't do as I did, again, in many situations, not just sex, kids just seem to dismiss that a lot. So it's best to focus just on information and the kid.
Whoever follows the podcast and the videos, you know me, I normally I am pushing for tell stories. Do a storytelling with your children about everything in the background, in their ancestors' life, everything. But this time I am going to be cautious about being more listener than sharing. Yeah. We want to be more a listener.
Yeah. And if you have the chance to talk with your kid early on in these little conversations, there may be more sharing by the kids. Sometimes kids in
Mhm.
these topics about sexuality and bodies sometimes will listen, not to stories, but to the information and to the values that the parents are imparting. They may or may not share, and that can be okay. The
Okay.
more parents leave space for listening, even if it doesn't happen, it just shows the kid that they will listen when the kid is ready, whenever that might be.
Yeah. What do you suggest to parents who get nervous about starting the conversation?
I would say they're not alone. I think that so many parents are so nervous, and I think it would be nice if we had some sort of way like this to educate parents on a wider level about these topics, because most parents weren't educated openly and in a non-shaming way either. And so
Yeah.
asking them to do something that they don't have experience with is really challenging. But there are resources out there to look at, how would I talk with my kid in a non-shaming way, or what would this look like? So there are resources out there I'm happy to share. But
Yes.
really, parents to also be willing to spend some time in advance thinking about, how was I raised around issues of sexuality, and how do I feel about that now as an adult? How did that serve me? Were there ways that it didn't serve me? Were there issues about consent and respect and ownership of one's own body? Those kinds of things, and just having them look at that and what would they do differently if they believed that it was okay to do it differently. And that can help them be more willing to address their nervousness, because they know what they maybe would have wanted to hear.
Yeah, please share the resources, especially for different ages of the kids. Um, are there websites or books, or what do you think parents can use?
There are websites and books. So one resource that I will point people to is amaze.org. Website. It's also a social media presence, and they have amaze.org and Amaze Junior, and they have different things for parents and for kids if parents allow their kids to watch them. But it's really for parents and kids to learn about different things about sexuality and bodies and relationships. And it's usually from about 4 to 14. It's mainly elementary school and middle school is what Amaze is for. There is another resource called Sex Positive Families. And some people
Mm.
hear that and think, what does it mean to be sex positive? I'm not sure how I feel about that. Um, in the education world, sex positive doesn't mean like, hey, let's tell everybody to go out and be sexual. It means non-shaming. So that's just another way of saying non-shaming sexual education, and the
Okay.
is termed sex positive. So Sex Positive Families is a resource. They have a website and a social media presence, and also a book about talking with kids about various topics. They'll break down different topics. How might you say this in a non-shaming way? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. And so it can be really helpful. Another website for teens and young adults is Scarletine, is a website. They also have published a few books, and there's a ton of information because it's more, again, for high schoolers and 20 somethings. So there's a lot of information about a lot of topics about sexuality and gender and relationships.
So all of the resources are going to be in the notes. So you can scroll down and find it in the notes. So you don't need to take notes right now. Don't worry about it. They will be there. What is the relationship with religion and talking about sex? Do you have any ideas about it?
Yes, I think this is an important topic because a lot of times people worry, well, how do I talk with my kid in a way that upholds our religious values? Or what do I do if there seems to be a conflict, and how do I approach that? So I would say that sexuality education and religion do not have to be at cross purposes. There traditionally has been quite a bit of shame paired with genitals and sexuality and religion. But I have seen a lot of examples that is not true. So parents can say things like, your body was created by God, and all parts of your body are just as God wanted. No part is bad. No part is dirty. It's just as it should be. And parents might, for instance, say, part of our religious values say that we would like you to not have sexual intercourse before marriage, for instance, but to frame it in a positive way, that this is a beautiful thing that you will enjoy with your spouse someday, and it's a beautiful thing. But parents sometimes get worried. They really want their kids to uphold these values. They really want their kids to make the kinds of choices like to delay sexual activity. And so they will use fear tactics and talking about being like as if, especially with girls, a lot of times with girls, their very self-worth is sometimes tied up in their choices. And that can hurt girls' self-esteem and relationship with themselves for a long time. It's a really hard thing to unpack when that's really been put in there quite young. And so there's a way to say, these are our values. We're hoping you will uphold them. We find them very important, and not be shaming and scary and negative about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very important. So in the doesn't matter the religion that you are, we have a body and we have needs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the most common mistake I found in especially parents who for religious purposes don't want to talk is that they don't learn how their teenagers are exercising their sexual life. They left out because then the child learned from other sources. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a concept of being an askable parent. Essentially, does the child perceive you as someone they could go to? If parents don't initiate conversations about bodies and about sexuality, then kids will perceive their parents as not askable, and they will not go to them. And sometimes parents will say, come to me with any questions you have. And that's great. That's a great thing to say. In my opinion, it's better than not saying that. But if you only wait for the child to come to you, they may not come to you. Because if you are not talking about it and you are not initiating those conversations, they will see that even though you say that, they don't see you as askable.
Mm-hmm. I am going to finish this conversation with one anecdote.
Okay.
I was studying psychology in Mexico in the bachelor, and we have a sexuality class. Yeah. So I was so brave and ready, and I wanted to change the way it was in my family and not talking about sex. And I came to the lunchtime, and I announced in the lunchtime that now you can ask me everything. Yeah. Now it was my sister, probably was like 12-year-old at that time.
Uh-huh.
And I announced to my mom and to my grandma and to everybody. My dad was there, and like, you can ask me anything because I'm learning, and in this family we are going to talk about sex.
Good for you.
Yeah, I was like probably 20, let's say 19. And then my sister raised her hand, the 12-year-old, and say, if I have pain in my vagina, this means I want sex. And my parents were like really kicking me out of the table. But hey, when you are askable,
There you go.
you will get to ask. Yeah. You will get questions.
The kernel I hear in that story, besides making me laugh, is that she was able to vocalize pain, for instance. A lot of people will not talk about pain because it's down there.
Yeah. See? That's simple.
There you go.
So, I have so many stories when I was brave in my family, but get ready and also enjoy it, because yes, it's really nice to be askable. I like that concept. I learned that concept today. I like it.
I'm glad.
Is there anything else, Holly, that we are missing in this conversation?
I think we've covered a lot of really good basics. I could talk, of course, for days about this and
Yeah.
really just expand and expand and expand. But I think we've covered some really important things. And again, I just want to drive home again, talking about sexuality also needs to talk about consent, right? And maybe that could motivate some parents to get over the discomfort, to be able to have those really important conversations to keep everybody safe.
Yes. And with your permission, I'm going to take notes and talk about this same conversation in Spanish.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's important that we put the information out there. You, as a parent, are not alone. We are here for you. We are askable.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can come and ask. And please, if you are in YouTube, don't ask in public in YouTube just for the safety, for your privacy. You can send an email. Holly is going to tell us if you can contact her, but you definitely can contact us too via email, and be patient because we take some time to answer emails. But either we answer something or we take that question and create other videos, or we send you a list of videos that may help you in that particular question that you have. Yeah. Something else, Holly?
I think that's it. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk. It's so important.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you,
Well,
Carmen.
yeah. Thank you. And hopefully you come another time and we have more conversations about this. I really appreciate on behalf of our listeners today. Thank you, Holly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Isn't that amazing? I told you it was delicious talking to Holly. I am so glad you enjoyed this conversation today. And if you are still here, please subscribe, share. Share with every parent out that you know. And go, if you are in the podcast, go and enjoy our brand new channel, Emotions in Harmony. Because many people say, Carmen, I also wanted in video. Okay, we have in video. We have a lot of our materials in video. So go and subscribe, please, to the brand new Emotions in Harmony YouTube. And in Spanish, it's not that brand new. We have more material in Spanish in the YouTube Armonía Emocional. So glad that you are here with us. And if you ever have a topic in mind, just send us an email and we will promise we put you in our list, in our pending list for topics. As somebody did request this topic like a year ago. Okay, bye for now, my dear listeners. Dale like y suscríbete.